Hi, I'm Brooke, and I'm going to be talking to you today about MAiD, or Medical Assistance in Dying. In 2016, Parliament passed federal legislation that allowed eligible adults to request medical assistance in dying. MAiD was set in place to help people who had reasonably foreseeable death. That was a contingency made in the legislation. Reasonably foreseeable doesn't necessarily mean they had a timeline of when they were going to die, but they made an intent to make it known that their death was foreseeable, i.e. withdrawing from life-supporting treatment such as chemotherapy, or there's rapid degeneration, and there's nothing that the doctors could do going forward. In 2021, reasonably foreseeability was no longer a requirement to request medical assistance in dying. This is where the 2 tracks came in that we discussed in class. However, this is where it becomes a little bit murky, because this has now opened talk about in 2027 now the only medical condition that would be required to request MAiD would be mental illness. It of course begs the question of who is now eligible, what mental illness is, and what standard of suffering is considered sufficient enough to be able to apply for MAiD. I was looking through TikTok and I saw that someone with autism and ADHD was able to apply. This was debunked. I did some research. This is not an actual case, but also this is new territory. What are the standards of who versus who can't apply? Another factor, are mentally ill people, depending on who's applying, actually capable? Do they have the capacity to fully know the procedure and the risks before applying? I disagree with this as well, because the inspirational message that the healthcare system says about MAiD being dying with dignity is corrupt. It's corrupt like most things in the healthcare system are, because 1, this is a profitable business per se. The government saves money on administering MAiD, around $62 million, as opposed to the alternative treatment of keeping someone on life support. This has contributed to why MAiD has increased in the leading cause of death in Canada, as well as discussing what's in these lethal injections that are so dignified. They use the same chemicals as what was put in lethal injections. So essentially, we are killing people the same way we killed criminals in incarceration. And I'm all for administering MAiD to people who are in extreme suffering and don't have any really other options. However, there's a bit of a lie about how MAiD is painless. It's actually not painless. From toxicology and radiology reports from people who had been administered MAiD, it is shown that the drugs that they put in the lethal injections cause holes in the lungs and cause them to be filled with fluid, causing essentially a feeling of drowning. But because you're under an anesthetic that's 10 times what you'd be under for a regular surgical procedure, you're essentially paralyzed, so you can't move and you can't ask for help and you can't express pain, but you're drowning till you basically die. And I don't know about you, but that does not seem like a dignified death to me. Therefore, our healthcare system shouldn't be giving this as an option to those who are mentally ill. They should be using resources to help people before it's too late, to the point where they're suffering so bad because no one helps them and the government turns them away and gives them an option to now end their life. We should be instead focusing on improving the quality of their life.